Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into something pretty cool, acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and how it can be helpful for folks on the autism spectrum.
It's really exciting stuff, and ACT is getting more and more attention these days, and for good reason. It's a type of therapy that basically helps you deal with life's challenges by, learning to accept your thoughts and feelings instead of constantly battling them.
Okay, so this isn't about just like giving up and accepting things the way they are, is it? Because, sometimes acceptance gets kind of a bad rap.
No, you got it. It's not about being passive. It's more about making a conscious choice to stop wrestling with your inner world and instead putting your energy into building a life that lines up with what matters most to you. And the ideas we're looking at today actually come from this piece called Cheap ABA, Autism and Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, ACT, a powerful combination. They make a really strong case for why ACT can be so powerful specifically for autistic individuals.
I'm ready to hear more about this. Let's unpack it.
All right, so first off, ACT really emphasizes accepting your autistic traits. Instead of seeing them as like problems or things that need to be fixed, it encourages people to see them as just part of who they are.
So instead of, beating yourself up for maybe struggling with social cues, you learn to just acknowledge those challenges without judging yourself.
Exactly. It's all about swapping that inner critic for a sense of self-acceptance. And this can be huge for autistic folks who've maybe internalized some negative messages about being different. Just imagine that shift going from I'm awkward in social situations to I experience social situations differently and that's okay.
Wow. Yeah, that is a pretty big shift. And actually, the source talks about how this acceptance piece can be super important for sensory sensitivities, which we know a lot of people on the spectrum experience.
Absolutely. It's a key point. Many autistic folks experience the world in a very intense sensory way. Sounds, lights, textures, they can all feel really strong. And that can sometimes lead to, feeling overwhelmed or anxious in certain environments.
So how does ACT help with that?
Well, mindfulness comes in here. It's a big part of ACT. And techniques like mindful breathing can help folks become more aware of their sensory experiences without judgment.
I love that you brought up mindful breathing. It's such a simple but effective technique. Could you give our listeners a quick how-to?
Sure. Find a comfortable position and just focus on your breath. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the coolness of the inhale, the warmth of the exhale. And as you're paying attention to your breath, you'll notice thoughts popping up. That's normal. Just gently acknowledge them and bring your attention back to your breath.
It's like training your mind to be present in the moment instead of getting swept away by all those thoughts and feelings,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Especially when those feelings are overwhelming.
You got it. And for someone who's dealing with sensory sensitivities, that can make a big difference. By practicing mindfulness, you can start to identify what your specific sensory triggers are, understand how they affect you, and come up with ways to manage them. It's not about getting rid of the sensitivities, but learning how to work with them in a way that helps you feel better.
That makes so much sense. It's like empowering yourself to create a space where you feel safe and comfortable. So we've talked about accepting autistic traits and mindfulness.
Yeah.
What's the next piece of the ACT picture?
It's values-based living. ACT is all about figuring out what your core values are, what really matters to you, and then taking actions that line up with those values.
Okay, so let's say someone's core values are creativity and connection. How would that look in their actions?
Well, they might decide to join an art group, volunteer at a community center, or maybe just make time for a weekly coffee date with a friend. It's all about making choices that bring you closer to those things that give your life purpose and meaning.
I love that. It's not just about getting by in life. It's about building a life that you actually love. And I can see how this would be especially powerful for autistic individuals who've maybe struggled to find their place in a world that doesn't always get them or meet their needs.
You're absolutely right. It's about having a sense of agency and control. You're not just passively accepting your circumstances. You're actively creating a life that reflects who you are and what you care about.
So it sounds like values-based living can really change things for the better. It's not just about accepting who you are, but actually using that self-acceptance to create a life that truly reflects your values.
Yeah, it's about going from just surviving to actually thriving. And that actually leads us to the last part of the ACT framework, committed action.
Okay, so we've talked about acceptance, mindfulness, and values. Where does action come into play?
Well, think of it this way. You figured out what your values are. You're practicing mindfulness to manage those tough thoughts and feelings. But now it's time to put those values into action. Committed action means setting goals that align with your values and then taking steps to reach those goals, even when you run into obstacles.
And I imagine that's where resilience is super important,
Yeah.
especially for autistic individuals who might face unique challenges in a world that's not always designed with their needs in mind?
Absolutely. Resilience is key for everyone, but it can be especially vital for autistic individuals who might come across social situations or sensory environments or even communication styles that just don't feel comfortable or natural. Committed action is about developing those coping skills, learning to advocate for yourself, and building a support system that helps you handle those challenges with more confidence.
So it's about understanding that setbacks happen, but they don't have to define you. You have the power to learn from them and keep moving forward.
Exactly. And that's where self compassion comes in. ACT really emphasizes treating yourself with kindness and understanding, like you would treat a friend. It's about recognizing that you're doing your best with what you've got, even when you mess up or face challenges.
It's like silencing that inner critic and choosing to be supportive and encouraging instead. I imagine that can be incredibly freeing,
Hmm.
especially for people who have maybe internalized negative messages about themselves.
It really can be transformative. And here's where it gets really interesting when we apply this to the autistic experience. Imagine someone who spent years masking their traits, trying to fit in, and feeling like they're not good enough. ACT offers a different way, a path of self acceptance, where those traits aren't seen as flaws, but as differences to be embraced and even celebrated.
It's like shifting from I need to change who I am to I can be myself and still be successful.
Exactly. And when you put that self acceptance together with mindfulness, values based living, and committed action, you've got a really powerful framework for building a life that's both meaningful and fulfilling.
So it's not just about managing symptoms or coping with challenges. It's about personal growth, pursuing your passions, and sharing your unique gifts with the world.
It's about knowing that you have something valuable to offer, whether or not you fit perfectly into society's expectations.
That's such a powerful message, and it really gets to the heart of what ACT is all about: empowerment, resilience, and living a life that's true to you.
Now, it's important to remember that the journey of self acceptance and personal growth isn't always smooth sailing. There will be bumps in the road, moments of doubt, and times when you might feel like giving up.
It's not always easy.
Right. But that's where the principles of ACT can really make a difference. By practicing acceptance, mindfulness, and self compassion, you build up that inner strength to keep going even when things are tough.
It's like realizing those difficult moments are just part of the process and that they don't take away from your worth or your ability to reach your goals.
Exactly. And here's a key point that I think is really relevant for our listeners. ACT isn't a one size fits all approach. It's more like a set of principles and techniques that you can adjust to fit your own needs and situation.
So there's no right or wrong way to use ACT.
Not at all. It's about finding what works best for you. Some people might find that mindfulness practices like meditation are really helpful, while others might get more out of focusing on values, clarification, and goal setting. The key is to experiment, be patient with yourself, and celebrate your progress along the way.
It's about finding the tools and techniques that speak to you and then making them a part of your daily life in a way that feels real and sustainable. And I think that's a really empowering message. You get to shape your own journey with ACT.
Absolutely. And you don't have to do it alone. There are therapists who specialize in ACT, and many of them have experience working with autistic individuals. Getting professional guidance can be super helpful, and they can help you tailor those ACT principles to your specific needs.
So if someone is feeling inspired by what they've heard today and wants to explore ACT more, what would you recommend as a first step?
I'd encourage them to just start learning more about ACT. There's a ton of great resources available online and in libraries, books, articles, even guided meditations. And there are also online communities and support groups where you can connect with other people who are exploring ACT.
And don't hesitate to reach out to a therapist who specializes in ACT. They can offer personalized guidance and support as you start bringing these principles into your life.
Exactly. Remember, starting on a path of self-discovery and personal growth takes courage. And asking for support along the way is a sign of strength, not weakness.
I love that. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but before we wrap up, I'd love to hear more about cognitive diffusion. You mentioned it earlier.
Oh, yes, cognitive diffusion. It's a really interesting part of ACT. And it can be super helpful for managing those sticky thoughts that can get us stuck sometimes.
You mean those thoughts that just keep replaying in our minds, causing us anxiety or distress?
Exactly. Cognitive diffusion is about learning to notice those thoughts without getting caught up in them. It's about recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts, they're not facts, and they don't have to control our behavior.
So it's like we can create some space between us and our thoughts.
Exactly. It's about realizing we don't have to buy into everything we think.
That's powerful. And this could be really helpful for autistic folks who might tend to overthink things or get fixated on certain thoughts.
You're right. It's about learning to kind of detach from those thoughts, to see them as just things happening in our minds rather than like absolute truth.
So instead of spiraling into worry or anxiety, you can acknowledge the thought, see it, and then let it go.
Exactly. And it can be so freeing, especially when it comes to those negative beliefs about ourselves that can sometimes hold us back.
So if someone's struggling with thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, cognitive diffusion can help them challenge those thoughts and make room for more positive ones.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those thoughts don't reflect your worth. They're just, products of your mind.
And that you have the power to choose which thoughts to pay attention to and which ones to let fade away.
Exactly. It's about taking back control of your mental space and making it a more supportive and compassionate place.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that ACT has so much to offer autistic individuals.
It really does. And one of the things I find most inspiring about ACT is that it goes beyond just managing symptoms or coping. It's also about personal growth and living a life that has meaning and purpose.
It's about embracing your true self, neurodiversity, and using your unique strengths and perspectives to make a difference in the world.
Exactly. And it's important to acknowledge that the journey of self-acceptance and growth isn't always a straight line. There will be times when it feels like you're taking one step forward and two steps back.
Yeah, there will be doubts, frustrations, and maybe even some fear.
Right. But that's all part of the process. It's about embracing the whole journey with all its ups and downs and realizing that every step you take, even the stumbles, is a chance for growth and learning.
And that's where self-compassion comes in again, being kind to ourselves even when we mess up.
Absolutely. It's about remembering that you're human, you're allowed to make mistakes, and those mistakes don't define you.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into ACT and autism, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
If I could offer one piece of advice, it would be this. Approach your journey with curiosity and kindness. Celebrate your strengths, acknowledge your challenges, and never stop exploring who you are and what you're capable of.
Beautiful advice. So to our listeners out there, as you continue on your path, remember, you're not alone. There's a whole community out there ready to support you.
And remember, ACT gives you a powerful set of tools to help you navigate life's challenges with more ease and resilience.
Keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep sharing your light with the world.
Because the world needs your unique perspective and your contributions.
And that wraps up our deep dive into ACT and autism. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Remember, the journey to well-being is a continuous one, and every step you take is a victory. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep embracing your authentic self.